Hi everybody, Adrian Plass here.
Yes, I'm Bridget. Hello.
We've done this 37 times.
I
Cannot
know.
believe
Mind you,
it.
37, significant year for you, Adrian. It was
Why?
you were 37, weren't you, when you wrote the Sacred Diary, and
No.
that did kickstart a
No,
whole
I
way of
wasn't.
life.
No,
You
no, I
were.
wasn't. I was 37 and 3/4.
Ah.
Ah, yes, yes, very important. So, over the last few mornings, I've been delighting you with rural sayings. I mean, I'm
Yes.
saying I'm delighting you, I have no idea. But you know how it is. I've left the worst till last, and I thought I might as well tell you the worst of them. Here's one of the worst. Right, here it is. Spit you east or spit you west, expect a pitchfork in the chest.
Adrian, that's horrible. It's
Yes, it is.
absolutely horrible.
That may be a perfectly legitimate response to spitting. I don't know. I haven't actually thought about it very much. All right, here's another one. When cold winds blow from mountain tops, mother's pudding limply drops.
Well, I suppose if she left it outdoors, it might, I
If
suppose.
she left it
Her
outdoors,
pudding.
I think that's a perfectly reasonable. I remember it happening to my mother. I mean,
Come on.
absolutely. And finally, and very simply and very profoundly, and in a sense rather beautifully, I want to tell you this one. This one is true. Full moon at night, moonlight.
Ah,
Oh, see, now that
Okay.
is true, isn't it? Every single time there's a full moon,
yes.
there's
Yeah,
moonlight.
that is true. That is true.
Thank you.
Well, yesterday, we were talking about mystery, and we were talking about or trying to sort of explore the fact that it's okay to live in the mystery. We're never going to understand the way that God thinks completely, and we certainly don't know anything about heaven. But it's interesting that parallel to that, judging perhaps from the way we're feeling, the way our family are feeling, the way it would feel that quite a lot of you are feeling from your emails and messages, it actually isn't much fun living in the mystery at the moment, if we mean the uncertainty of the time. There's really no real facts coming through as to how this wretched virus is going to be in the future. We don't know when lockdown's going to finish. We are beginning, I think, many of us to feel very uncertain and insecure because of all this. And I think a lot of us wish we were more like children, really, because children love mysteries. They love not knowing what's going to happen next. They love
And-
surprises.
And we see them out at the moment, don't we? Perfectly happy
Yes.
because they're not reflecting on the drear consequences of what's going on, most of them.
Well, and
anyway.
of course they're having their best bit
They're-
because they're walking,
That's
going
right.
for
they're
the
out,
walks.
they're out walking. I remember our Kate, who's now 33, when she was a baby, and we went into a very dark tunnel on a train one day. And as we went into the tunnel, she put her thumb in her mouth. So the disappearance of the daylight corresponded precisely with the thumb going into her mouth, and she took it out and looked at it in amazement, obviously thinking, "This is incredible. I just take my thumb, put it in my mouth, and the world goes dark." And she tried to repeat this miracle all the way to Brighton, if you remember, and all the way back. And it occurred to me that a lot of denominations are founded on less. So a fruit falls on someone's head when they have a spiritual revelation. They start the church of the fifth fruit, and everyone has to throw apples and pears around on a Sunday. I don't know. Anyway, yeah.
Well, we are asked to look for blessings during this period. Maybe
We are,
one of the
yes.
blessings is that there aren't too many new denominations being created out of things as daft as that. I don't know.
No, I don't know either. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, it's interesting though, this swirling, this slightly strange, hopeless feeling. We have encountered it in various places in the world, haven't we, where areas are absolutely up against it, trying to cope with things that are far bigger and more difficult.
Well, and that was largely a matter of contrast. I mean, when we went to Zambia, and we were supposed to be looking at work being done with people who are suffering from AIDS. And before we went, actually, I remember before we went, we thought we are going to try to destroy what we've decided so far, which is that anything labelled universal will never work on the thing that you use it for. So we were very careful to buy universal plug sockets, adapters.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
And fortunately, when we got to the hotel, our first hotel, they worked. Now, the day after that, we met our first AIDS sufferer, and it was traumatic to say the least. If you remember, we were taken to a little tumble-down hut, and they got some broken-down chairs out, obviously the best chairs for us.
The only chairs, I think.
And we sat there, and they brought out this lady, and there she was. We had little notebooks, didn't we?
Well, we had little notebooks because, as has happened every time we've been on one of these trips, we're just there for about 10 days. And the idea is that we get down absolutely everything we can, not just in terms of facts, because we can check them, but in terms of the feelings, the way things are, the looks, the smells, the atmosphere. Yeah. So there we are with our 2 little notebooks.
There we were. And the 2 ladies who were helping us went into the little house, and they carried, really, supported under both arms, a lady who was in her 30s, and she was suffering from this plague of AIDS, which at that time was tearing the fabric of Africa apart.
Well, it had torn her family apart, hadn't it?
Put it to me, yes.
Hadn't all her children died? I think they had.
I don't know. I can't remember that. But she was in a terrible state. And I can remember when I looked at her, a sort of scream rose in me, and I had to choke it because we weren't there to scream. We were there to watch. And she was crying. And when I asked why that was, very quietly, the nurse said, "Oh, it's an eye condition. Her system's weak." And there was, if you remember, there was a sort of incrustation on her chest.
She had shingles
and that
as
was
well,
shingles.
didn't she?
That was because of the AIDS.
Sake.
And I sat there and I panicked. Our adapter might have worked in the hotel, but I don't know how to put it. I had nowhere to plug my faith in. There was nowhere in this poverty-stricken, disease-ridden place for me to just plug it in, because my faith was nurtured in a country where you have a roof over your head and 3 meals a day, and things kind of work out.
And home groups and church and,
all that
and
stuff.
books and
all that stuff, and tearing Bible verses apart and telling each other we think the Lord might be saying something. All very easy to do. And I remember saying to God in my mind, I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to reconnect. And we had to just sit there and remember we are there to watch and listen and eventually write a book that might help people like this lady Rose in the future. And I'll tell you what came into my mind then. You know what came into my mind. It was that verse in the book of James, the brother of Jesus. And it said, "True religion is about helping widows and orphans and staying unpolluted by the world." And I thought, okay, I think I'm plugged in. That'll do for now. That'll do for now.
And any power that was going to come through would come from God and help the people who were already there. Absolutely. Well, of course, that idea of being unplugged is something that we are experiencing, I think. So many things aren't working. They're not working all over the world. You know, there was a picture I saw just recently, for example, of Disney World in Paris, empty. These things that have just sort of been there aren't there anymore. It is a very disturbing thing, and I think it can cause a sense of panic. You know, one of the Psalms has a go at that, really, and it's particularly the second line of this little bit that I'm going to read. It's actually Psalm 73. "When my thoughts were bitter and my feelings were hurt, I was as stupid as an animal." And when I read that, I think of all the rabbits that get caught in the headlights of a car and they're just startled and they're paralysed and they can't move. And I think that's what panic does. It means that you can't think anymore, you can't do anything anymore. And he goes on, "I did not understand you, yet always I stay close to you and you hold me by the hand." It's a funny thing, but I think in a way that is what we have to do. We have to hold on to the things that we do know and we can trust. But there are dangers with this panic. And one of them, I think, is that we try and find things that kind of will help us randomly. So I promise you, I'm not saying it isn't that it's always wrong to just open the Bible at random. But there are dangers, because some of the things, especially in the Old Testament, aren't relevant at all, especially relevant to the situation we're in. This is a letter written by somebody who has heard some verses from the Old Testament preached that morning. Dear Pastor, first of all, thank you for your wonderful talk on Sunday, reminding us that the Old Testament is just as inspired and inerrant as the New. Well, later on, I opened the Old Testament and was led to this passage from Deuteronomy. If someone has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father and mother and will not listen to them when they discipline him, his father and mother shall bring him to the elders and shall say to the elders, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious, he will not obey us, he is a profligate and a drunkard, and then all the men of his town are to stone him to death. Well, I was stunned. Those verses could have been written with my 16-year-old son Darren in mind. Darren never does what he's told, and Darren argues with everything I say. So, bearing this in mind, I am writing to ask if I could arrange for Darren to be stoned to death, preferably on a Tuesday or a Thursday, and if possible during the next fortnight. There are some practical questions because our town doesn't have a gate, so perhaps I thought maybe the patch of waste ground between Tesco's and the Esso garage could be considered a symbolic gateway to the town. And then, concerning the stones, well, our local garden centre offers quite nice bags of rocks at a reasonable price. What I wanted to know is there a particular shape or size or colour more spiritually fitted to the purpose? And also, are refreshments appropriate? Because if so, I am sure the ladies of the entertainment committee would be more than happy to arrange finger food and soft drinks. Finally, it might be better not to actually tell Darren what we're planning until much nearer the date of the stoning. You know, he can be very negative and uncooperative when it comes to church events. What do you think?
Yes, indeed. I was thinking, even as you read that, that if you're not careful, you can either substitute the things with the wrong things, or you can just question everything away. When I was going through this breakdown 30, whatever it was, years ago, I had this kind of nightmare in my mind that we would all go to church, and I'd go to church as usual, and that we all carried black bags, and in the black bags was evidence of our faith. And we never opened them. We just tapped them and sort of said, yeah, lovely, you've got yours, I've got mine. We all know we're okay.
Mine's quite heavy.
Yeah,
got a lot of stuff in it.
That's right. And some people perhaps mimed having heavy bags. And then one day, to our horror, the minister or pastor would say, today we are going to open our bags. And my nightmare, and it was a serious one, was that one by one, slowly, we would open our bags and there would be nothing in any of them. And I remember mentally opening my bag, as it were, and looking in it. And doesn't matter what anyone thinks about this, the thing that was still in there was Jesus. That's what was in there, and that was what sustained me. And I've tried to express this in other areas. Well, I wrote a book a little while ago about a man called the Shadow Doctor. And the book is mainly about the Shadow Doctor and his friend Jack, who's much younger.
Yeah, and he is trying, really, isn't he, to go beyond the sort of normality of the Christian life. And
well, he's trying not to use Christian language, and he's trying to only do things that really happen and to tell the truth, which is not easy. And on this occasion, he's explaining to Jack something connected with the onion. This is an extract from the book. Jack, I know you're anxious for me to take apart and explain my reasons for dealing with situations and people in such varied and sometimes bizarre ways. I understand that. I do. I think it might help to consider this. Look, have a look at this. This, Jack, is an onion. A wonderful thing. Essential to most dishes, an enhancer of tastiness and flavour, a singularly worthwhile entity. I see you're nodding. You're a cook. You know about onions. Okay, let's investigate this. What would happen if, tragically, I lost my faith in my onion? What if I developed a need to investigate my onion in order to reassure myself that it actually existed? What if I said to myself, I can't bear the thought that my onion has no centre, so I peel a layer off, and that will reveal another layer, and then another peeling, and another layer, and another, and another, and I would take layer after layer off until there were no more layers left, or rather, nothing but lots of bits of layers of onion, and then I might decide that my onion never really did exist. After all, when I took it apart, it disappeared. There was no heart, no centre. And that might be true, but what a disaster if I decided to give up using the non-existent onions that perversely continue to be readily available in every shop in the country. So, my point is this, Jack. While I'm aware of the need to take apart and explain the way in which I respond to people, we mustn't rip apart things so comprehensively that they disappear altogether. The taste, the flavour, it might be lost. I do hope you take my rather defensive point, Jack. And that is the central point, that we have the flavour of Jesus, which makes a difference to the meal that we
absolutely
offer.
We don't have the definitive answers either to our present situation or to God or to the future.
No, we don't.
We do have a sense, though, that without God, the world is flavourless. And maybe that's our job at the moment, to add flavour as much as we can, shove it in there to every situation we find ourselves in.
Well, we'll do our best. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you next time.